So hello, everybody. My name is Antonio. I'm an assistant professor at UPenn. Today's talk is going to be a little bit of a break from what you've seen before on autonomous driving and like such kind of tasks. I'm going to speak much more of what is kind of the title of the talk of this workshop, which is kind of embodied intelligence. What does that mean? I think there is quite a bit of disagreement in the community on what that means. Some people say, oh, it's like a car that does, I don't know, drives everywhere. Some other people say it's a humanoid that cleans my kitchen. Yeah, like I think everybody has a different opinion, and today I'm happy to share mine. I promise that I make my talk interactive and fun, which I think like is maybe better for like this kind of small and cozy audience. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions like during the talk. Okay, so let's start from the first one, which is how many have never heard of drone racing? Can I get a raise of hands? Okay, quite some. Well, drone racing, it's very similar to car racing. So you have a track and you ask pilots to go as fast as possible to the track and complete it in the shortest possible time. There are two differences with car racing. The first is that the pilot don't sit in the car, right, in the vehicle. They control it through a remote that they have in their hands. And the sensing, it's from an FPV like goggle that connects directly to a camera mounted on their drone. So why is this, in my opinion, much more fun than car racing? Well, just because you can go much faster, you can push your vehicle to the limit, and you don't have to worry about crashing. Like worst case, you crash a $300 drone, you pick a new one, you start again. Okay, so it's kind of quite of a fun exercise, right? At least for humans. It's a sport. This is kind of a video of a human flying around like at very high speed through, like a track out in the wild, passing through these gates and whatnot. Okay, it's a fun problem for humans. And it's also very challenging to become one of the best in this sport, like on a world scale. Like this is, for instance, the ranking of a world championship qualifier, which happened like 1 year ago. I'd like to draw your attention on a couple of things. Like the first one is that there is a couple of second difference. So approximately, 5 to 10% of the whole time between the first and the third position, which actually means that the first pilot is very, very good, right? But there is only a 1 second difference between the second and the 10th position, which again implies that you really need to fly at the limit, right? A small mistake gonna make you slow, I don't know, half a second, you're out of the top 10. So yeah, kind of challenging task. And our goal was to create an autonomous system that could fly as good or even better than human pilots. So quite a challenging PhD topic. Okay. Also, why is racing interesting from a scientific perspective, like, beyond being cool? Well, racing is definitely not a good fit for imitation learning. There is just one world champion, and you can collect a lot of data from them. And the second thing is you don't want to be as good as the world champion, right? You want to be better than them. So, I mean, definitely like imitation learning, it's not the best fit. You'll have to look more towards, like RL or optimization-based techniques. And that's exactly what we did. This is one of the first work that I did like during my PhD. I mean, we were trying to optimize like for track speed and time using some optimization-based algorithm in a simulator, right? That's the only place where you can do because kind of you're learning through experience, trying to randomize everything possible such that you would then generalize to the real world. But this kind of obviously failed, right? Think about it, like domain randomization gives you a policy which is good on expectation, on average, over all possible scenarios. That's not what you want, right? In drone racing, you want the best policy for the particular scenario that you're flying in. So no surprise that that domain randomization with this approach give us only intermediate results. Okay, so we, yeah, and like, of course, we use this for end-to-end control, and that's why we were doing drone race. Domain randomization didn't work very well. So we had to move to a much more modular approach, which allowed us essentially like to decouple problem. Now, instead of having a single neural network that takes in observation and produces action, we would take some of the onboard sensing of the robot, so like its IMU and its onboard camera, to do some state estimation from VIO, combine that with a gate detector, again, like running on board. You fuse this information together with a Kalman filter, and you get an estimate of the robot position approximately in your track. Then you pass this estimate to like an MLP policy, which you train through reinforcement learning in simulation. And you then can apply this kind of straight on your robot. So, I mean, kind of just for reference, that's how our training goes like. At the beginning, the robot flies more or less randomly. And as the training improves and gets better, gets faster and faster, and tries to like essentially follow like the fastest possible race line. A good question here is, well, how do I make sure that this training, which happens in simulation, obviously you can't do this in the real world, is an accurate match of what happens in the real world? On two axes, like the first is this state estimation, which will obviously drift and have errors in the real world. How do you model those errors? And the dynamics, right? Like your robot might be subject to aerodynamic effects, like the rotor-rotor interactions, battery drops that aren't captured from a simple first principle model. So you need to make sure like to match those things as good as possible, right? If you want your policy training simulation to work in the real world. And the way we do it, it's kind of quite simple, right? We first start with an approximation of it. We train a policy, we deploy it in the real world. We use the real world experience to collect a data set, which help us improve both our observation model and our dynamics model. Okay, so kind of this works kind of okay. You do this couple of times, and that's kind of the policy that you get. Ours is in blue, and the best human champion is in red. You see drones kind of flies quite fast. Again, the only observation that our drone gets is IMU and onboard RGB camera, like a view like this one. Flies pretty well. The speed around this track, like they're around 35 miles per hour, and it has to pass through big gates, which are approximately 3 feet in diameter. And yeah, I mean, it works pretty well, like definitely better than we were expecting. We made as much as possible to that was kind of essentially in our control to make the comparison fair with the human, right? Yes. Slides are not visible, so share screen. Oh. Yeah. Is this one? No. I do this. And then I go. Does it work right now? Oh. Oops. Let's do. You scroll down a bit.
Want your presenter.
Yeah.
But okay, maybe we can continue like this if it's easier.
I'm sorry.
No
Yeah.
worries. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't see
Yeah.
second desktop.
Yeah, should be there. But we can continue as before. Yeah. So that you have at least the local.
Yeah, I'll show
Okay.
kind of the local one.
So
Yeah, no problem. Oh, it works right now. Look at this. Yeah, the magic. Um, okay, so let's go back. We were trying to do this comparison as fair as possible, right? We use exactly the same drone for the human and for our autonomous system. Humans have this thing which makes them very annoying, which is they have a lot of perception latency. That's why we compensated for it at the start, right? When you get the start sound, you wait like some seconds such that, yeah, you give the ability to a human to listen to like the start, and then you start the competition. But of course, like we couldn't make everything entirely fair, right? Our drone was using an onboard inertial measurement system, like an IMU, which humans, of course, don't have access to, right? You can't pass them information about acceleration. That's what we have in our vestibular system. There is no way like to connect it. However, our camera only updates at 30 hertz, while the humans one, they need 120 hertz, or they're not going to be able to fly very well. Also, all our computation was on board. So we had a lower latency, like approximately 40 milliseconds for like action decision. While humans, I mean, again, they have like this 200 millisecond latency. You can't do much with it. I mean, at least in my opinion, it's unclear if that matters a lot because the environment is predictable, right? There are like no dynamic moving obstacles or such. That's why you can predict very well in the future. Latency is not a big problem. Anyhow, we try to make the comparison as good as possible. And I mean, it turns out that we reached approximately kind of the performance of the best humans, right? Ours was not really a clear win. Like we won 60% of the times. So I think, again, it's more or less kind of comparable. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's worse. I'd like to point out some interesting things that like we found out in the comparing like humans with the autonomous drone. Like first of all, the human does not the autonomous drone does not always fly faster. It's actually much faster at the start, but then slows down in other part of the track, which enables it to make tighter path in the most difficult maneuvers, like you see here, like the split S on top and like the short turn on the bottom. Right. So essentially kind of what happened is that the autonomous drone got much better in long-term planning than the human. Okay, so I think like this was quite a nice result. We got it published on Nature, got the cover, even though I think it was quite interesting that the editor misunderstood the kind of fluid in which our drone was going. It's not really in water, we are flying in air. But it's okay. It's just another fluid. Anyhow, like nice. It's a kind of nice result. Yeah, but I want to share something particularly interesting that happened at the day of the competition, which I was definitely not expecting, and that influenced a lot of my research after that. Okay, to tell you that first I have to say a bit of words, some words about the human champion and the nature of drone racing in itself. Okay, those here are the human champions which we competed with. They are pretty good. They won like several national and international competitions. The first thing you'll notice is that they are all extremely young. Like, I think the oldest of them, who's kind of this guy, who was kind of the world champion, was 20 years old. The guy in the middle was the Swiss world champion. At the time, he was kind of 14 years old. So this gives you an idea of the kind of skills you need to be very good in these sports, like low latency and kind of gaming-like attitude. Okay, again, like this pilot won a lot of competitions, and you know, imagine you're a kid, you're flying everywhere around the world, like you're the best. You have an enormous ego, right? And this kind of ego also comes out during the competitions, not only the one against the autonomous drone, but in the one between humans. Apparently, drone racing is not only a physical sport, but a mental sport, essentially where you're there, seated like with other pilots, you try to, you know, talk to them, try to play them down, saying words like, oh, like, you seem like to be good, but you know, I think like I'm much better than you. Oh, like this turn was not so good. What are you thinking about? And they were trying to do the same game to us, right? Like this kind of guy over here, like said multiple times, oh, like, you know, what am I doing here? Like, you guys are just hovering around. I'm not sure, you know, like, this is going to be an interesting competition for me. Anyhow, well, he quickly understood that our approach was as good, if not better than him. And this annoyed him like quite a bit, right? It was absolutely unexpected. Like during the competition, after, you know, 1 or 2 runs, he realized that our drone was much more sensitive to collision than his own, right? I mean, we are our system. We were like, we had like a well-calibrated system, camera in one place. You know, there was a VIO running. So I guess like you're aware, these things require good calibration. And he noticed that if we would just touch one of our drone, like our system would essentially break, while he was able to fly even with an half broken drone. So what did he do, like, to try to always win? Well, try to collide with our drone and make it crash. And then like he could continue and win the race. Interestingly, this didn't work very well. Imagine trying to hit something which moves at 30 miles per hour, small thing, and you are only looking at it through forward-facing camera. It's like very hard. So kind of he missed our drone many times and just end up losing even more. But he then found another interesting strategy, which I particularly liked. So he was just waiting in one part of the track, just kind of waiting over there on the floor, and waiting for our blue drone to pass. As soon as our drone would pass above it, it would give a little bit of thrust, go up, crash it, and then, you know, like our drone would obviously fail and it would go around and like can win the game. Okay, I found this like extremely interesting, right? Because if you go and you compute the game theoretical optimal solution of a drone racing game, you'll never find a solution like this, right? This just comes out of the complexity of the real world, of hardware, which is kind of not good enough, of, you know, like the limited perception, like all of this complexity, again, gives you like these interesting strategies. I want to make just a comment here. This is not allowed in drone racing, right? It's a race, it's not a war. But still, again, it's extremely exciting, right? We have seen our pilot adapting to the behavior, to the strengths and weaknesses of limitation. But I mean, our drone could not do it, right? Was definitely like not able to take the information that it saw from previous races and get better and adapt to the pilot limitation. To me, this is exactly the definition of embodied intelligence, right? The ability to deal with failure, uncertainty, and novelty. And all of this on a very small data budget and computational budget. I don't think that we have systems today that are able to do this. right? And this is kind of not specific to drone racing. Whatever case you have, like you have these challenges, and yeah, like that's embodied intelligence for me. Before I move on, though, because kind of I'm gonna change a little bit of gear and show you like some of my work in this direction. I first want to see from the audience if there are like any questions about the drone racing problem or like any comment on my definition of embodied intelligence. Yes, please. If you could.
Setup. How robust is it for like movements in the gates or like the actual position of where it's supposed to go? So if the path changes.
Yeah, if it changes a bit, it's not a problem. If you change it drastically, of course, like you would have to retrain it. But in races, usually like the path is known in advance. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's very interesting problem. Yeah, and my question is about your simulation. Yeah, you're training with the simulator. Yeah, the question is how can you make the simulation like if you control the drone, yeah, there's some delay or something. Yeah, how can you make sure the controlling the simulations as real as possible to the real world?
Yeah, like what we do essentially is modeling both the latencies and you know, like the observations and the dynamics. All of this we do it, you know, simulator. We train something, we apply it in the real world, we collect some data, observing, you know, like latencies and dynamics and whatnot. We use it to improve the simulator, and we do this kind of couple of times such that we get a high quality simulation.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a loop. Yeah, make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this kind of simulator is developed by a team, or it's some public available simulator?
Yeah, I mean, like we developed it, but you know, like right now, I think you can use like other things like, you know, ISAC and whatnot to get like similar performance. The power is in the residual that you learn from the first principle model, that you can do whatever simulator you have.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering for the state of the art from racing problem, is this kind of RL or to beat like a traditional MPC plus dynamics model approach already, or still the MPC is actually better in terms of this?
Yeah, no, there's no way that MPC actually can reach this performance. I mean, we have studied this problem somewhat extensively. MPC, MPPI, they work much worse like than RL. And the reason is not in their optimization scheme, right? I mean, they optimize like very similar cost function, right? It's just that RL does it offline and MPC does it online. The problem is that MPC and RL, they optimize for different things. MPC tries to optimize for like track a trajectory online, which is as closest to the time optimal trajectory, while RL just optimizes for minimize track time, right? It's a higher level abstract reward. If you have a trajectory, in the moment that you try to track a trajectory, at the time you are not anymore time optimal. And the reason is that, you know, when you compute this time optimal trajectory, you make assumptions about the drone, about its model, which are obviously wrong, right? And, you know, as soon as you get far from the optimal trajectory, you are wasting energy to try to get back towards it. Instead, what you should do at every point is, you know, compute the optimal trajectory from every possible point. Computational expenses. RL does this automatically.
But does it also mean that RL is only good under this specific racing environment, or maybe MPC is actually maybe better in a more general drone setting?
Well, I am not sure that you know, like is only good for like this specific drone environment, right? If your problem is like race, then you know, you make some specific assumption on how you train RL. If your problem is avoid obstacles, you make other assumptions on how you train RL. And this kind of goes into the training pipeline.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh, yes, please.
You presented this problem about these adversarial agents.
Yeah.
Have you thought about solutions to this related to the simulation or the closed loop simulation from the last talk?
Yeah, kind of, that's kind of something that we have been working on. What's very hard here is how to model like these other agents. You can try to, this is like first thing that we tried was kind of modeling them as, game theoretical optimal agents. But that turns out to not work very well, to our surprise. The reason is that, humans are not as rational as we think they are, in particular, like during racing. So quite surprisingly, we thought that like modeling agents as, sometimes random, sometimes good, gives better performance in the real world than just modeling them as being always optimal. It's kind of interesting result. We're still looking into it, but yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks for the questions. Let's kind of then move on. Okay, this is my definition of embodied intelligence. Try to cope with novelty, uncertainty, and failure with little data and little compute. This has inspired a little, quite a lot of the research that I've done afterwards, right? And a good question here you can ask, okay, how can I get there? There are several approaches, right? The first is, well, I can collect as much teleoperation data as I can. I call this the VLA way. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, there are different approaches that you can do. There's probably the one of just tune costs, if you are kind of having an optimization-based approach, or tune rewards if you're training RL. We are saying like, they're quite similar, which, yeah, I'll call the optimization way. I think there are strong arguments for and against each of them. So I don't think I'm going to take a position on which one is better than the other. I place myself somewhat in the middle between the two, which essentially I try to use like the tools of like supervised learning, but rely as much as possible on the data collected by the agent itself, right? Not collected by humans. So in a paradigm which is kind of quite similar to the one of self-supervised learning. Okay, and to give you a practical idea of what I mean, I'll now show you a work on legged locomotion, which I did like a couple of years ago, which I think exemplifies this concept pretty well. The high-level goal of the project was training a policy to like control a legged robot to walk on complex terrains, like, like stairs or like discrete terrains, like a forest, like whatever, only using as input proprioception and the camera coming from an egocentric, an egocentric RGB camera mounted on top of the robots that you can see kind of that thing on the small on top of the robot in white. Okay, there has been a lot of previous work on vision-based locomotion. I guess at this point, everybody has seen the super fancy video of Uni3, like, like going anywhere. But the goal of my project was not getting yet another vision locomotion system or like outperform the state of the art there. I really wanted to understand a different question. You see, this is a very good summary of like previous work on vision-based legged locomotion. You just have a depth camera, which gives you information about the geometry of the environment. You pass this through a neural network, and then you get some action, which allow your robot like to move around. I didn't want to do this. I wanted to use just an RGB camera, right? Which, I mean, of course, like scientifically, it's more interesting, right? This RGB is much more difficult to model. it's unclear how to do sim to real, and it's subject to many more information differences between simulation and real world, lighting conditions, and whatnot. But it also contains much more information. Let me show you an example. This here is a depth image, right? And well, what can we see with it? Probably this kind of flat like terrain over there, nothing much interesting, right? This is the corresponding RGB image. You see there is much more information, right? Even if like the whole thing in flat, like the property of the terrain change quite drastically, right? We go from grass to sand to like water, which like most probably you can't walk on. And all of this information are only available like if you do RGB. So yeah, this kind of was the main goal, like train a vision-based, RGB-based vision locomotion policy. Okay, how do we do this? Again, you can't do straight what other people did because it's not so easy like to simulate like RGB and their connection to the intrinsic property of the environment. So like we have an intermediate block, right, which takes RGB vision, produces some terrain properties of the environment, and then these terrain properties are used like for locomotion. If you have terrain property and proprioception, we know how to train locomotion policies. People have done it a lot in the past, so kind of, it's easy. We know how to do it. The interesting part was this one, which is how do I go from RGB vision to terrain properties? Of course, I can't use existing data set, right? I don't think there is anybody interested specifically in this problem. And I can't also ask humans to annotate. I mean, do you know what is like the friction of this terrain, or like the particular height differences of it? Like that would be way too hard. So kind of we found, well, an interesting idea to estimate those properties. And this is the following. Proprioception, which is essentially the position, the knowledge of the position of the robot, like legs and feet, is actually a very good way to estimate such properties, right? If, like I move my feet higher when I was climbing the stairs, I know that there is kind of a height difference. Vision, which again, we want to estimate this property, senses the exact same thing of proprioception, but just senses it in advance, right? So kind of this really gives rise to a temporal-based self-supervised algorithm where vision tries to predict future proprioception. And that's exactly kind of our idea, like cross-model supervision. Those are like the high differences predicted by proprioception. What we do is essentially, oops, something happened.
Let me open it again. Just the PowerPoint accidentally. Do you remember which slide?
Yeah. Guys, this one. There is no virus in my slide, I promise. It's okay. Like I can skip that slide.
Yeah, maybe you use this
Yeah,
bottom to
yeah.
go to the next one. This one, right?
Yes. And just to make sure that does not crash again. No, it's like the video that crashes it.
Okay, I
Okay,
see.
I'm gonna like just skip the slide. It's okay. Good. Okay. So yes, kind of. So you use proprioception like to annotate the terrain, and then you use a supervision signal for
Sorry, sorry.
Really sorry about it. Maybe I open too many things. Let me close some of them.
It's work. No.
Maybe we try the one you share with me online.
It's the same. Yeah. It can be like higher, too much latency.
Might be.
Again, like PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no. Okay. Let's see. Can I try?
Maybe we don't check this. Yeah, and just simply okay.
Our videos yeah, that works. What we can do is like just kind of skip that part.
Okay. I like this.
Yeah, you see, now it always happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe we don't play the video. We just go with playing talking.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's not so good. But yeah, maybe don't play it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Don't know what to do. I'll skip like that entire part. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry, this is not my computer and I have no idea why, like, this is happening. I'm not sure if this happens for like all videos. Okay, this does not happen. Anyhow, does this happen also here? Okay, so a couple of like things, like you have this self-supervised like process which uses proprioception to like train vision, and this seems like to be like a very nice self-supervised loss which allows the robot like to essentially walk anywhere. Right? But the nice thing of this self-supervised approach is that it is like very robust. So like what I'm doing here is like just taking the camera on which it was trained and like rotating it of like some degrees, completely unknown like to the algorithm. Of course, like while I do this, the performance of our policy will decrease, right? Just because it was not trained with like the camera tilted in this direction. So kind of it will start to struggle. However, after just 1 minute of data collected in this new setup, the robot it's back to kind of its original performance. So yeah, kind of, this is kind of really like what I mean by being able to learn from failure and uncertainty. Okay, so like a very few, very quick like takeaways. We need a like this proposed a self-supervised loss to recover from failure and adapt to novel conditions. The main idea is predict one sensor from the other. And also kind of one of the core concept of this is that interaction is a very good tool to learn about the environment. Right. And this is not just about robots. Like we can think that we can use the exactly same idea to make, for instance, like simulator or 3D reconstruction much deeper than just kind of vision and geometry. Like for instance, we might want to like, go in a 3D reconstruction and know that this part of the environment is rigid and rough, or like for instance, move in another part and ask ourselves whether that is kind of soft or crumbly. Right. A way of knowing this, I mean, all of this information is not contained today, even in the most advanced 3D reconstruction or simulator system. And a way of doing this is essentially going straight and interact with the scene, right? From the sound that the scene makes, we might have an idea of the intrinsic property of the scene, right? Doing this, of course, requires data set, right? With how do you do it otherwise? And this was one of the core ideas of a project which we presented at the CVPR, presented on Friday. Like I'm gonna go fast through it, so like for more details, please come to our poster. The main idea behind this work was essentially like to predict the sound of actions. Can't hear the sound. This should be the sound.
it.